seated. Those who love their dream of a Christian community more than they love the Christian community itself become destroyers of that Christian community, even though their personal intentions may be ever so honest, ever so earnest, and ever so sacrificial. This is a quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was a theologian who came to acclaim during, really his writings were almost exclusively done during the Second World War. Bonhoeffer believed that he needed to be part of the plan and the movement that would execute Hitler. And Bonhoeffer believed until his dying day that in so doing, even though he believed it was the right thing to do, the right thing for the world, he would be condemned to hell for all time. And so he writes, and we may substitute the word my church for Christian community. He writes about becoming so consumed by our dream, our ideal of what we think our church or our Christian community ought to be, that we actually destroy the community itself. Even when our aims are meant to be good. I wonder if Nicodemus was having that sort of a comeuppance with himself when he went on that dark night to see Jesus. Nicodemus shows up twice in the story of Jesus' life and death. Where's the other place we see Nicodemus? Anybody know? At the crucifixion, yes. It is Nicodemus who goes with Joseph of Arimathea and takes Jesus' crucified body down from the cross, anoints it, wraps it in linen, and places it in the tomb. Thus, Nicodemus finally makes his public and in the light of day confession of faith to all that Jesus was teaching. But in this story that we hear today, Nicodemus comes by dark of night. Now we are told that Nicodemus is a leader in the community, in the Jewish community. He was probably very high up in the community. He is older, we know, we believe. And he has been hearing Jesus' teachings round about. And even though he teaches the laws of Leviticus, he teaches the Torah, something about what Jesus is saying is beginning to resonate with him. He's beginning to hear an alternate message to the one around which he has built his dream of community, his dream of church. He's hearing a message that is something different than it must be this way. It must be by these mandated, human-made rules. We must keep the structure the same as it is. The people who have always been on top must remain on top, and those who have been at the bottom must remain at the bottom. And he begins to wonder, am I holding on to a dream that is hollow? A dream that is not going to get me anywhere other than repeating the laws over and over and over and over again. Until he comes to Jesus. And he comes with not a question on his lips, but a question in his heart. And his question, he sort of stumbles through this conversation with Jesus. He doesn't even really know the right words to say. He's not even sure how to frame his question, but his question is, how do I break out of this life that I have? How do I let go of this dream that is false? To live differently, to live fully, to take hold of this promise that you are giving to us, Jesus. And so he says to Jesus, how is it? How is it that one can be born again? Can one go a second time into the mother's womb, even though one has become very, very old? He can only frame his question in the very physical, real sense of what he knows about life. And Jesus says to him, of course that can't happen. We all know that we cannot relive those things of our past and make them new again. We all know that. But Nicodemus pushes and he says, I want to understand this, Jesus. And Jesus says to him kind of a funny response. He says, you know, the wind blows where the wind will blow. It comes from a place that you don't know and goes to a place where you know not of where it goes. Now, Nicodemus must have been a little confused, as I think we also should be. How is it that Jesus goes from a story about birth to a story about the wind? I don't know about you, but I don't think the wind was present at my birth. But Jesus, of course, is not talking about a physical birth. Not in the sense that we know birth. Jesus is talking about a birth that is God's birthing of us through the winds of the Holy Spirit. Jesus is talking about each of us being overtaken by the Spirit in a rush of wind that will change every single piece of our lives. Physically, spiritually, emotionally. We will come out of that experience new and different people. We will let go of those dreams that are hollow and destructive and not life-giving in order to live into the dreams of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit that we discussed last week. Do any of you remember what the fruit of the Spirit was that we discussed last week? I didn't tell you there was going to be a test. There's a test. There are 7 of them. The first one's joy. Second one is love, peace, faithfulness, gentleness, kindness, and self-control. Jesus is saying to Nicodemus and to us that if we allow the Spirit to indwell in us, the rush of the wind to change us, we can let go of our dreams and our desires because the Spirit has something far greater, far more permanent for us than we could ever imagine. Jesus is saying that if we let the wind of the Spirit inhabit our churches, our Christian communities, then our intentions would fall away, and the intentions of the Holy Spirit, the co-creator with God, would take root. Now, we don't know what happens to Nicodemus after he leaves this conversation with Jesus Christ. We don't know if he goes back and he resigns his position. We don't know if he starts his own Bible study and starts teaching the teachings of Christ. We don't see the events between this conversation in the dark and the day we see him at the foot of the cross. But because we see him at the foot of the cross, because we see him anoint Jesus' body, wrap it in linen, and place it in the tomb, we know that he was changed. We see that he was changed. Now, because we're reading in John today, we have to understand this story on multiple levels. We need to understand the story as probably a historic event that happened in which a man named Nicodemus traveled by dark of night to see a man named Jesus Christ. We also have to understand the story as metaphor, that the darkness represents something else. The darkness represents perhaps an absence of understanding. Perhaps the darkness represents the movement of Nicodemus from the dark night of his soul to the light of salvation. We also need to understand the story in our own lives. We need to take the story into our lives and look at the places where we are in the darkness of our own dreams. Where our dream of the ideal community, our dream of the way it has always been, the way we want it to be, the way we think it should be, the perfection of our own persuasion holds us from seeing the light that the Spirit has held out for us. For most of us, I would say, it's far easier to live in the darkness, to hold on to the persuasions that we've created even when they stop working. It must have been frightening for Nicodemus to take that long walk in the darkness to see Jesus. It probably was more frightening to take the walk in the afternoon light after the crucifixion. To admit to himself and to all of those who saw that he had been wrong, that he had been holding on to the wrong dream, and to step into the light of the Spirit's awakening.